Imagine this. It is the 11th century. You are standing on the streets of the Song Dynasty capital. Back then, this was the center of the world. Even the most famous paintings couldn't capture 10% of its real energy and wealth. In your pocket, you have a few thin sheets of paper covered in complex patterns. With just these papers, you can buy the finest wine at a tavern or the lightest silk at a shop. This paper is called Jiaozi. It was the very first true paper money in human history. People back then believed this paper was wealth itself. But they didn't realize that this magic trick called credit was actually a suicide pact for the empire. The scariest part? This logic of harvesting wealth is still haunting us today, 1,000 years later. Today, let's take apart the biggest financial experiment in history. Let's see how an empire used paper to completely rob the wealth of its people. The story begins in Sichuan province. The government played a trick called currency isolation. In Sichuan, you could only use iron coins. How heavy were they? Well, buying a roll of silk meant dragging over 100 pounds of iron. Even going out to buy vegetables felt like carrying a load of bricks. Survival forced evolution. 16 highly trusted merchants stepped up. They said, "Leave your iron money with me, and I'll give you a receipt. You can use this paper to trade." That was the ancestor of paper money. Basically, it was a bank receipt, backed 100% by real metal. At this point, the paper was sacred. Behind every sheet lay a pile of heavy, real value. However, this pure trust was destroyed by a man we can call the Song Dynasty Fed Chair. I'll tell you his name at the end. Under his push, the government took over the money. At first, they were careful. They kept a 28% reserve. But then war broke out. Enemy cavalry roared at the borders, and military spending swallowed the treasury like a black hole. If you were the emperor, you had two buttons in front of you. Button 1, raise taxes. This could lead to riots. Button 2, quietly turn on the printing press and just print more paper. Which one would you choose? The government chose the second option. The reserve system collapsed. From that moment on, paper money was no longer proof of wealth. It became an IOU on the future issued by the government. The government realized that as long as they kept printing, they could buy grain, horses, and the loyalty of soldiers. But behind the scenes, every ordinary person holding that paper saw their wealth silently melt away. When the amount of paper exceeded the actual goods in the empire, disaster struck. Prices went crazy. Money that used to buy a full sack of rice eventually couldn't even buy a single bun. Terrified people rushed to the banks to get their metal back, but the government said, "No exchange allowed. You must use the paper." This led to the most ironic scene in financial history. There was money everywhere, but nothing to buy. Wealth didn't disappear. It was simply transferred through inflation from the pockets of the common people to the rulers. The Song Dynasty eventually fell to invaders, but its financial system had already burned itself out from the inside. 1,000 years have passed. Our money today isn't anchored to gold or silver. Its only backing is government credit. History never repeats itself, but it often rhymes. When credit is maxed out and the printer is the only solution left, is the fate of the Song Dynasty predicting our future? The man we called the Song Dynasty Fed Chair was Jing, the Prime Minister of Song Dynasty and a very famous calligrapher. In these uncertain times, what is the true safe haven? Is it gold, Bitcoin, or is it knowledge and skills? Tell me your answer in the comments. This is the Paper Empire channel. Thanks for subscribing.